Welcome to Prayer Points for the Harvest, a weekly communication designed to equip you to pray for the fulfillment of the Great Commission. This is Jonathan Soloria. Over the next several weeks, we're discussing the significance of prayer walking. Prayer walking is quite simply a combination of walking and praying for the purpose of living in unceasing fellowship with God and for the purpose of offering on-site intercession for specific people and locations and places. Prayer walking is not a new invention, but one that has its roots in the pages of Scripture, beginning with a man named Abraham. Abraham, as we saw last week, was the first to walk by the command of God through a land of promise. However, he was not the last. The Bible later tells us about a man named Joshua, who very famously took a prayer walk around the walls of Jericho. However, before Joshua ever even intended to take this prayer walk, he first took a prayer walk of a different kind. The Bible tells us in Numbers chapter 13 and 14 that Joshua was one of 12 men selected by Moses to scout out the land of promise. Specifically, Moses gave them instructions on 3 levels. First of all, they were to go into the land for the purpose of scouting out the land itself, to see if it was a good land, a rich land, a blessed land, and for the purpose of scouting out its inhabitants, the people. Were they weak or strong? Were they plentiful or were they scarce? Were their cities strong and fortified or were they relatively defenseless? In the same way, prayer walkers today go out and prayer walk their communities with land and with people in mind. We understand the promise of Scripture that if we ask, God will give us the nations as our inheritance. And yet we understand at the same time that what's truly important is not the land and those possessions, but it is the people in them that are precious and important to God. We, as we prayer walk, should always be considering the people that we see, as well as the places that we see, for these are the things that most matter to God. Of course, many of them are opposed to God, and so as we go out, we must understand this, and we must try to understand how we move into a community for the sake of setting captives free. The second element of this particular prayer walk had to do with what they were to bring back. Moses instructed them to bring back some of the fruit of the land. Now it was the beginning of the grape growing season, and yet the Bible tells us that the spies brought back one cluster of grapes that was so large that it took a pole and 2 men to carry it. Why were they instructed to bring back fruit from the land? Because the fruit of the land was considered to be a sign of the blessing of God. You see, it wasn't a question of whether God wanted them to take the land. It was a matter of when. And so they went in looking for first fruits, signs of the blessing of God. And if the blessing was there, it was a symbol that they were to go in. In the same way, prayer walkers today, as we prayer walk for communities, we try to look for these signs of God's blessing. Is this a place God is calling us to? If it is, there will be signs and indications of His movement in the forms of first fruits. We must open our eyes and be wise to these fruits. And that leads into the third and final stage of this particular prayer walk. As the spies came back, they were to give a report. Now, 10 of the spies gave a negative report. They said that the land was good, but that there was no way that they could take it for themselves. On the other hand, Joshua and Caleb gave a good report. They said not only was the land good, but the people, though strong, are unable to stand against God, if God is for us. It is so important as we prayer walk and as we give reports to always understand that it is not by might or by power, but by God's Spirit. If God is for us, none can stand against us. And if God calls us into a community, it does not matter how strong the opposition is. The only thing that can stop us is ourselves. I encourage you this week as you pray for the harvest to pray for vision to see the promises that God is giving you. Pray for faith to believe God is stronger than the obstacles that stand in your way. Pray for signs of the blessing of God in the places to which He is calling you. Pray for courage to trust God in the midst of doubt and discouragement. And thank God for choosing you to be the beneficiary of His blessing.